Okay, today is April 28th, 2021. It is the fifth day of our ninth unit. Today's lesson is obviously shorter as we will be done in 22 minutes. And we just need to go over some very brief concepts that I think will be pretty easy for you all to understand. If there's any part of this lesson that does not easily come to you, I will, of course, upload this lesson to YouTube and you'll be able to view it at your leisure. Additionally, these concepts I think will be quite interesting to you all. So if there's something that you would like to look further into, then feel free to use your resources. Check out some videos on YouTube. You've got some videos in this lesson, but I'm not sure we'll be able to watch them all. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So the title of today's lesson is Ecological Relationships. The objective is to be able to explain various ways organisms interact with each other and with their environments, resulting in stability within ecosystems. We've talked about how ecosystems have changed, both as a result of natural events as well as a result of human activities. Today, we're going to be thinking a little bit about what the natural order and dynamic is between living organisms throughout various ecosystems. The essential question today is, how do organisms communicate with one another to benefit their own populations? Okay. So you all should obviously still be taking notes. So I'm going to take my time as I move through these slides. If I go a little bit too quickly, please let me know. Send me a message in the chat and I'll try to slow down. But I'm going to take a pause here just to give you all an opportunity to make sure you're set up. You've got your notebook out, something to write with. The note-taking process is still something that is important to us. Delete. Okay. So as you can see on this slide, we're talking about two specific relationships. So biotic factors, meaning living organisms, interact with each other in their environments in really two main ways. Symbiotic relationships, which are defined as any type of close long-term interaction between two different biological organisms of different species. So we're not talking about two humans interacting with one another to mate, or two insect species interacting with one another to protect their hive. In this case, we're talking about different species, organisms of different species, and how they interact with one another, sometimes in beneficial ways and in other instances in harmful ways that we'll talk about. The other type of interaction would be feeding relationships, which are exactly what they sound like. Any interaction in which an organism gains energy by eating another organism. So we know that there are heterotrophs, which are organisms that need to find other sources of energy that cannot produce their own energy. The opposite of that would be an autotroph, which is an organism that is able to produce its own energy, typically through the process of photosynthesis, using energy from sunlight to make glucose. Okay, so we're not talking about autotrophs today. We're talking about those heterotrophs, organisms that have to actually find another source of energy, another source of carbon, as we mentioned yesterday, talking about the carbon cycle, in order to find energy for themselves. So in nature, there are 6 symbiotic relationships. Again, a symbiotic relationship is defined as any type of close long-term interaction between two biological organisms of different species. So this image really helps to explain these 6 symbiotic relationships. Species A is on the left, species B is on the right. Species A can benefit. It might have no effect at all in its relationship with species B, or it might be harmed by species B. And same thing with species B. It can benefit between or from its relationship with species A. It might experience no effect at all, or it could be harmed by species A. And we see these 6 interactions in their names. We're going to talk about 3 of them in particular: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. But there are others. There's neutralism, in which neither species is benefited or harmed. This is really difficult to prove, and it would be quite rare to witness. There's Commensalism, in which one species is not impacted positively or negatively, whereas the other species is indeed harmed. And lastly, there's competition, which I'm sure you all are quite familiar with, in which both species are actually harmed. Maybe not constantly. Maybe there are periods when one species is benefiting from another, or from, one species is benefiting from the interaction. But oftentimes both species are harmed from their competition, because nature can be a zero-sum game. So first, we're going to talk about mutualism. In mutualism, both individuals benefit from the interaction. So make sure you get that definition written down. In mutualism, both individuals, of course, they're different species, they benefit from the interaction. So an example might be oxpeckers that kind of ride on the backs of different animals on the safari. In doing so, they feed on the parasites, and they feed on the flies and the fleas that might be on the backs of these larger animals. The benefit to the oxpecker is that they get food. And the benefit to the larger mammal is that they've got some type of pest control. These fleas might otherwise be harmful to them. So the fact that the oxpeckers are eating the insects provides a benefit to the mammals. Another example might be a bird that sits literally in the mouth of an alligator and eats the scraps of food that are in the alligator's mouth. The benefit to the bird is that it, of course, gets that food source, and the benefit to the alligator is it's got some oral hygiene. Its mouth is literally being cleaned. Okay. The second type of interaction is commensalism. And just by looking at this image here, we can tell that commensalism benefits one species, and it has neither a positive nor a negative impact on the other species. Something happened. My slides got out of order. Sorry. So here's the commensalism definition. One individual benefits while the other is neither significantly harmed nor helped. So we've got some cool images demonstrating that as well. In the middle, we've got these birds that are riding on some type of mammal. They're riding on the back. The benefit for them is that they can actually spot their prey a little bit more easily from that higher height. And they do so without expending any energy. Of course, birds typically can fly and spot their prey, but here these birds are standing still, and they just get a little bit of a height boost to look for their prey. And of course, the larger mammal is not really helped or harmed by this interaction. We see some type of mammal again that has antlers on the left. We see that the spider has built this elaborate web between the antlers of this animal. The mammal itself is neither harmed nor helped by this web. At least we don't think so. The thing about commensalism is that some research does show that it's just early stage mutualism. meaning that the relationship is still developing, and in fact, both species will eventually benefit from their interactions. Or some scientists believe that we just don't fully understand the relationship enough. So perhaps the whatever this is, this deer is benefiting from having the spider web between its antlers. We don't know. We still have yet to explore those questions. But for now, commensalism is still thought to be a thing. It is still thought to exist in nature. One individual benefits, while the other is neither significantly helped nor harmed. Okay. And then there's parasitism, in which one species benefits, whereas the other species in the interaction is going to be harmed. So you all have obviously heard of parasites. The individual that is benefiting is referred to as the parasite, while the other individual, called the host, is harmed. Parasites don't necessarily have to live inside of a host. Sometimes, in the case of lice, they might live just on the exterior of the host. And sometimes, in the case of mosquitoes and other bloodletting insects, they don't actually live in or on the host, but they visit temporarily to suck some blood out. This is, of course, harmful to the host. Even in the case of bloodletting insects, which take blood out, they can spread disease. If there's hyperexposure to these organisms, a person may become anemic. So the host is indeed harmed in these interactions. Tapeworms, of course, live in the gastrointestinal tract of organisms. So this appears to be the large colon of some organism, the large intestines. And these tapeworms are going to consume some of the vital nutrients that the host organism really needs. And more importantly, one of the primary roles of a large intestine is water absorption. So these tapeworms are going to be drinking the water that is really meant for the host's body, and the host can become severely dehydrated because of that. So those are those are the three most important. I did mention that there are others as well. Neutralism is almost impossible to prove because in most interactions come about because one species is going to benefit, or because there is some type of exchange of energy, some type of exchange of resources that's possible. So neutralism, in which neither species is harmed or benefiting from the interaction, is rare. Mentalism, on the other hand, as this image shows, is when one species does not benefit and the other species is actually harmed. The other species has no benefit nor harm. So mentalism, an example might be sheep that trample grass. Of course, the sheep, their hooves are not being harmed by walking over this grass, but of course, grass is a living organism. So the grass itself is dying as these large herds of sheep trample over them, especially during a migratory season. So the grass itself is essentially killed, but the sheep is not benefiting, nor are they being harmed. And then lastly, competition. Competition harms both species. We can think about apex predators in the African safari. These apex predators are basically hunting the same prey. If, for example, hyenas did not exist, then lions would have a much larger source of food. They wouldn't have to compete for every antelope. Same thing with the lions. If the lions did not exist, the hyenas would not have to compete. They have a larger food source. They'd have more opportunities to catch prey. But instead, they both are harmed because they're competing with one another for the same thing. And of course, there is only a limited amount of food available. So those are the three additional that we don't really focus on. They probably will not appear on your EOC exam, but I just thought they might be interesting to you all. Then we talk about feeding relationships. So the previous type of relationship we talked about were called symbiotic relationships. Feeding relationships, of course, are when one organism is extracting energy from eating another organism. One type of feeding relationship is called predation. One organism called the predator kills and eats another organism called the prey. That's pretty obvious, right? Now, we often think about, again, apex predators, these large, fierce beasts, but they're even herbivores can be considered predators as they eat plant organisms. We could think of specific insect species that eat other insects. We could consider those predators eating prey. So it's not solely humans and large cats and bears that are predators. It's any species that kills and then eats another organism that defines predation. Okay. I'm not going to watch this right now. We're running out of time. Now we're looking at this graph. We can see that the interactions between predator and prey are cyclical. So the prey population is the orange curve here. The predator population is represented in blue. We can see that as the prey population increases, of course, that means that there's more food available to the predators. So the predator population also begins to increase, but there's a slight lag. Then eventually, as the predator population increases, they have greater food needs. So they start to eat more and more and more prey. And so what we see is that the prey population begins to decrease because they're being eaten, because the predator population has grown to be so large. As the prey population decreases, the predator population decreases as well because there's not as much food available. So we can think about a term we learned earlier in the week, carrying capacity. Once there's less prey available, the ecosystem's carrying capacity is severely limited, it's decreased. And so less prey means fewer predators. And then again, as the predator population decreases because there's not enough food, that allows for a rebound in the prey population, and it begins to increase again because they are not being preyed upon as much. And so we have this cyclical relationship that exists between predator and prey populations. That's good to keep in mind. There will be a question about that on your exam on Friday. Okay, scavenging is another type of feeding relationship. And scavenging is when one organism eats a dead organism, and that organism has died from causes other than predation. So scavengers do not actually kill their food. They've died from some other infliction. It may have been that they were killed. It may have been that they have just died from natural causes or from some type of disease. So what we see in scavenging organisms is that they often have really strong immune systems, and their stomachs have specific chemical compounds in them that make them much more resilient. They can break down bacteria. We don't see them having a large bacterial colony existing in their digestive systems, because by eating dead organisms, they're putting themselves at great risk for infection. So their bodies have developed, they've evolved these strong immune systems and these really adaptive digestive systems so that they don't get sick from eating these dead organisms. So important to note here again that they are not actually killing their food.
It looks like
Thing to write down here, but just important to know the differences. So we've heard of these terms before: carnivore, herbivore. Maybe you've never heard of frugivore. A frugivore eats mainly fruits, roots, nuts, and seeds. An omnivore is going to eat a large variety of all food sources, so they really don't discriminate. And that's not as common in nature. Most organisms are going to be plant or meat eaters almost exclusively. And then decomposers eat dead and decaying matter. And they're such an important part of an ecosystem because they return their organic matter back to the soil. They return the nutrients to the soil. So these might be fungi, these might be specific insects or specific bacteria, but in breaking down the dead and decaying matter, they return it to the soil. We often see decomposers crop or pop up on fallen trees that have died. You might see them in bunches of leaves that are decaying and becoming a part of the soil again. Okay, that's it. So it's 9:10. That was perfect timing. I'm not going to assign this assignment for today. I'll make sure that it's available for you all tomorrow because today is a shortened lesson. And we've got one more day to learn new material, and then Friday will be your unit exam. So make sure that you're using your time wisely, going over your notes, doing any warm-ups and exit tickets that you may not have gotten to so far. And then Friday we will meet again, or tomorrow we'll meet, but then Friday we'll meet specifically to take the Unit 9 exam. So thank you all for being here today.